Imagine you're standing in front of a mirror at 3 in the morning. The house is quiet, the lights are low, and for just a fraction of a second, you don't recognize the face looking back at you. That moment of blankness, that half second of who is that, it's more ancient than you think. Because for most of human history, mirrors weren't just objects. They were portals, warnings, traps for the soul. And the fear you feel staring too long into one? That wasn't superstition, that was a cultural memory passed down across thousands of years from people who genuinely believed that the reflection was not you, but something wearing your face. We're going to go deep into that history. Where mirrors came from, what people believed they could do, why nearly every civilization on Earth wrapped them in ritual and fear, and what it means that we still feel a little uneasy around them today. This is the dark story of mirrors. Let's go back to the very beginning. Before glass, before silver backing, before the perfectly smooth surfaces we have now, humans encountered their reflections in water. A still pool, a puddle after rain, the calm surface of a lake at dawn. And that first moment, the first time a human being looked down and saw themselves looking back, must have been genuinely strange. Because you're seeing something that moves when you move, that mimics every gesture, that seems to know you, but lives in a place you can't reach. The ancient Greeks had a myth built entirely around this moment. Narcissus, a young man who saw his reflection in a pool of water and became so transfixed, so convinced that what he was seeing was real, that he wasted away staring at it. The myth isn't really about vanity. It's about the seductive danger of the reflected self, the idea that the image of you is more compelling, more perfect, more real than the actual you. And if you spend too long with it, you lose something. Now, the earliest manufactured mirrors we know of were made around 6000 BCE in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, from polished obsidian, volcanic glass, black, smooth and reflective enough to show a face. Archaeologists have found them buried with the dead, not left behind, buried on purpose, which already tells you something about what people thought these objects were. By 3000 BCE, the Egyptians were making mirrors from polished copper. The wealthy had them. Priests used them. And they weren't just cosmetic tools, they carried deep religious meaning. The Egyptian word for mirror was ankh, yes, the same symbol that meant life. The mirror wasn't just showing you your face, it was showing you your living self, your vital force. And that made it sacred and dangerous in equal measure. Here's a detail worth holding on to. In ancient Egypt, mirrors were sometimes placed in tombs facing away from the body, not toward it. The reason archaeologists believe? To prevent the reflection of the dead from becoming active, to keep whatever the mirror held from waking up. Across cultures that had no contact with each other, separated by oceans and centuries, almost all of them arrived at the same belief. The reflection is the soul. Not a copy of you, not a trick of light. The actual living soul. In many indigenous traditions across Africa, the Americas and the Pacific Islands, still water was avoided or treated with immense caution because looking into it too long could allow your soul to slip out. Your reflection, they believed, was you in your most vulnerable form, separated from your body, hovering in the surface, exposed. The ancient Romans had a version of this. They believed the soul renewed itself every 7 years. And a mirror, when broken, would trap that soul mid-renewal, leading to 7 years of suffering. That's where the 7 years of bad luck superstition comes from. It's not arbitrary, it's the soul's renewal cycle. Think about that for a moment. The next time someone tells you not to break a mirror, you're hearing the echo of Roman cosmology from 2000 years ago. That's how deep this runs. The Chinese tradition, going back at least to the Han Dynasty, held that mirrors could reveal demons. Not just reflect the physical world, but pierce through illusion and show what was really there. Mirrors were hung above doorways to reveal evil spirits in their true form before they could enter a home. Some were carried as talismans. The logic was elegant. A demon or ghost has no true form, so when it stands before a mirror, it either shows its real face or nothing at all. Either way, you'd know. And in ancient Mesoamerica, particularly among the Aztecs, mirrors weren't passive objects. They were windows into other worlds. The god Tezcatlipoca, one of the most powerful and feared in the Aztec pantheon, was literally named Smoking Mirror. He carried a black obsidian mirror that could show anyone their future, their sins, and their death. To look into Tezcatlipoca's mirror was to see truth, which in Aztec theology was always partly terrifying. And here's what makes all of this so fascinating. These weren't isolated beliefs. These weren't just stories told to scare children. These were organized, systematic cosmologies built around one simple, unavoidable fact. When you look in a mirror, something looks back. And nobody, for most of human history, was completely sure what that something was. Let's talk about what that uncertainty produced: the rituals. Once people decided the mirror held something powerful, they needed rules, procedures, ways to interact with it safely, and ways to use it intentionally. One of the most widespread rituals across cultures is covering mirrors after death. In Jewish tradition, it's called ananut, the practice of covering all mirrors in a house of mourning during the Shiva period. There are several explanations given for this practice. One is that during grief, vanity is inappropriate. You shouldn't be looking at yourself when your attention should be on the deceased. But the older, more esoteric explanation is this: a recently departed soul is still present in the home. If it sees its own reflection, the body it just left, it might become confused. Or worse, trapped. The mirror is covered to give the soul a clean path out. You find a version of this same practice in Victorian England, where covering mirrors during a death in the household was standard. The reasoning varied: to prevent the soul of the deceased from being captured, to prevent the living from seeing the ghost of the recently dead standing behind them in the glass. But the instinct was identical. In rural Appalachian folk tradition in America, mirrors were turned face first toward the wall during thunderstorms. Lightning, in that worldview, was attracted to reflective surfaces. But more than the physical danger, there was a spiritual one. Lightning could crack open the boundary between worlds, and a mirror, already thin at that boundary, became a doorway in a storm. Then there are the divination uses of mirrors, what occultists and historians call catoptromancy. The practice of using mirrors or reflective surfaces to see the future, communicate with the dead, or gain hidden knowledge. John Dee, the royal advisor to Queen Elizabeth Reed, mathematician, astronomer, and practicing occultist, used a polished obsidian mirror brought from Mexico for what he called scrying. He believed it allowed him to communicate with angels. The mirror still exists. It's in the British Museum right now, in London. You can go see it. A black stone disc, about the size of a hand, that a man in the 16th century used to speak to what he believed were supernatural beings. Nostradamus reportedly stared into bowls of water and mirrors to receive his visions. The oracle at Delphi was said to use polished metal surfaces as part of her rituals. And in early American folk magic, young women would stand in a dark room on Halloween, holding a candle and looking into a mirror. The belief was that at midnight they would see the face of their future husband in the glass. If they saw a skull, they would die before marriage. These aren't just cute superstitions. They're part of a consistent cross-cultural idea. The mirror is a membrane, a thin place. And with the right conditions, darkness, stillness, intention, you can see through it. Here's where it gets genuinely strange, because modern psychology has confirmed that mirrors are not neutral objects. There's a phenomenon called the strange face illusion, documented by psychologist Giovanni Caputo in 2010. If you sit in a dimly lit room and stare at your own reflection continuously for about 10 minutes without looking away, your face begins to change. Subjects in his studies reported seeing monstrous deformations, animal faces, the faces of deceased relatives, and faces of complete strangers appearing in their own reflection. This isn't hallucination in the pathological sense. It's a specific feature of how visual processing works. The brain, when deprived of varied input, starts to generate. It fills in the gaps with pattern recognition pulled from memory and imagination. The longer you stare at your own face, the more your visual cortex destabilizes the image. Which means every single person in history who stared into a dark mirror and saw something terrible, they did see something. It just came from inside them. But does that make it less real or more? There's also the mirror and identity formation. The developmental psychologist Jacques Lacan identified what he called the mirror stage, the moment between 6 and 18 months when a baby first recognizes its own reflection as itself. Lacan considered this a foundational moment in ego formation, but also a moment of misrecognition. Because the image in the mirror is always slightly off, reversed, distant, static in ways the body is not, we learn ourselves through a version of ourselves that isn't quite us. Lacan argued that this creates a permanent split in the self. We are always chasing the image, always slightly alienated from our own reflection. And this, he believed, is the root of a profound human unease that never fully goes away. That unease is ancient, and mirrors keep feeding it. So we have mirrors as soul catchers, as gateways for demons, as tools for prophecy, as psychological destabilizers. But there's one chapter of mirror history that most people don't know, and it changes how you see every elegant, gilded mirror you've ever walked past in a museum or a palace. For most of history, mirrors were not accessible to ordinary people. Polished metal mirrors, copper, bronze, silver, were expensive. They required skilled craftsmen. They degraded. They tarnished. The image they showed was dim and distorted. Glass mirrors backed with metal foil were invented in Venice in the 13th century. And the Venetians guarded this technology like a state secret. The mirror makers of Murano, the island near Venice where glass production was concentrated, were forbidden from leaving the Republic under penalty of death. Not exile, death. Because the monopoly on mirror production was worth an almost unimaginable amount of money. French King Louis XIV wanted Venetian mirrors for the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, now one of the most famous rooms in the world. Venice refused to export them. So Louis XIV's finance minister, Colbert, orchestrated the smuggling of Venetian glassmakers into France. Several of them were found dead shortly after. Venice's intelligence services, it's believed, had them assassinated to protect the trade secret. People were murdered over mirrors. And when the Hall of Mirrors was completed in 1684, 357 mirrors lining a gallery 73 meters long, it wasn't decoration. It was a weapon. Diplomats, foreign royals, anyone who entered that room was surrounded by their own image, overwhelmed by reflected light and reflected grandeur, constantly confronted with Versailles showing itself to itself. It was engineered narcissism, political theatre using mirrors as the stage. The price of a single large Venetian mirror in 17th century France was roughly equivalent to the cost of a warship. Let that land. A warship. Which means that when you see mirrors in old paintings of wealthy households, you are seeing a status symbol more aggressive than any car or jewelry you might flaunt today. Ordinary people, meanwhile, used water or polished tin or nothing. The democratization of mirrors, affordable glass mirrors available to the general public, didn't really happen until the 19th century, when chemical silvering processes replaced the old foil methods. For the first time in history, the working class could see themselves clearly. And historians have noted that this shift, suddenly millions of people having access to their own clear reflection, had real social and psychological consequences. A surge in concern about personal appearance. The beginning of modern beauty culture. A new kind of self-consciousness that hadn't existed before. Before cheap mirrors, most people went through their entire lives with only a vague idea of what their own face looked like. Sit with that for a moment. Now let's talk about the thing that probably brought some of you here. The mirror rituals that have survived into living memory. Bloody Mary. You know it. You may have done it at a sleepover when you were 10. You stand in a dark bathroom, face the mirror, say Bloody Mary 3 times or 13 times, depending on the version, and wait to see a face appear. The origins of this ritual are genuinely murky, which is part of what makes it fascinating. The most common historical association is with Mary Award of England, the Catholic queen who executed nearly 300 Protestants in the 1550s and suffered multiple failed pregnancies. Bloody Mary, as a nickname, came from her enemies. The mirror ritual, some scholars believe, was originally a fertility divination practice, young women asking to see the face of a future husband, or, in its darker form, a skull indicating early death that later grafted onto the historical figure as the name stuck. But the deeper function is consistent across every version, using a dark mirror in isolation to summon a face that isn't yours. That is catoptromancy. The same thing John Dee was doing, the same thing ancient scryers were doing. Wrapped in a children's game, stripped of its original meaning, but structurally identical. The Candyman mythos operates on similar logic. The ritual, saying a name 5 times before a mirror, taps into the same cross-cultural wiring. Mirrors as thresholds, names as invitations, darkness as the key. Why does this stuff still work on us? Why does a grown adult feel a flicker of something when standing in a dark bathroom, even knowing it's nonsense? Because the fear isn't learned. It's built in. The strange face illusion is real. The uncanny valley your own face can fall into under the right conditions is real. And 10,000 years of cultural conditioning telling you the mirror is a threshold that doesn't just evaporate. It lives in the part of your brain that operates before reason gets a vote. So here we are, thousands of years of history, from obsidian volcanic glass buried with the dead in Anatolia, to a French king murdering mirror makers to protect a monopoly, to children summoning Bloody Mary in suburban bathrooms. What does it all add up to? Here's the turn that I want to leave you with, because it reframes everything we've talked about. We no longer just have mirrors on our walls, we carry mirrors in our pockets. The smartphone front camera, Instagram, TikTok, the profile photo, the selfie. We are, right now, living through the most intensive period of human self-reflection in history. The average person today sees their own face more times in a single day than most people in the 18th century saw it in a lifetime. And what are the consequences? Exactly what Lacan predicted. A population deeply, sometimes pathologically, concerned with the gap between the self and the image, between who you are and how you look. Body dysmorphia rates are climbing. Self-esteem measured increasingly in external validation, likes, views, engagement on the quality of the reflection you project. We've built a civilization-scale mirror and we are all staring into it. The ancient people who covered their mirrors, who buried them face down, who refused to look at still water too long, they understood something intuitively that we're now learning empirically. The reflection is seductive. And if you lose yourself in it, something important disappears. Narcissus didn't drown because he was vain. He drowned because he forgot the reflection was not real. And we are right now building entire social structures, self-concepts, and mental health crises on the premise that the image is what matters, that the reflection is the person. Thousands of years ago, people covered the mirror when someone died. Maybe because they were afraid the soul would get trapped in the glass. Maybe, and I find this interpretation more interesting, because they understood that grief is the time to turn away from the surface, to stop looking at the image and start inhabiting the reality. Mirrors have always been more than glass and silver. They are objects that force a confrontation with your own face, with the passage of time, with the question of what the image of you actually is. Every culture that ever encountered a reflective surface eventually built mythology, ritual, and fear around it. Because the question the mirror asks is the oldest question there is. Who are you, really? And is the thing you see when you look at yourself the actual you? The Aztec god with his smoking obsidian disc, the Venetian glassmaker fleeing assassins in the night, the Victorian family draping black cloth over every mirror in the house, the kid standing in a dark bathroom whispering a name 3 times, the person scrolling through their own photos at 2 a.m. wondering why they don't look the way they feel. All of them are circling the same mirror. All of them are asking the same question. And the glass, as always, gives back exactly what you bring to it. If you want to go deeper on the histories that don't make it into textbooks, the rituals, the origins, the stories that got buried, that's exactly what we do here at the Origin Archive. Subscribe and stay close. There's a lot more where this came from.